So on occasion, both parties will have an ownership interest in a business during a divorce, and that can really complicate things. Fortunately, in many cases, one spouse may have an ownership interest but may not play an active role in running the business. And the reason that I say that's fortunate is it makes it much easier when we're dividing the assets because it's very clear who's going to be running that business going forward. It's more complicated when both play an active role, and that really becomes very fact-specific. It's really rare that parties are able to continue to successfully run a business together post-divorce. It does happen. I've seen it happen. We had clients that owned a restaurant, and somehow they managed to, if I recall correctly, she was the chef, so she ran the back of the house, as they say in the restaurant world, and he ran the front of the house, and they pulled it off, and I think to this day, they still have been very successful. That's rare, and unfortunately, most people are unable to do that, and that certainly complicates the divorce and requires, a lot of conversations with your attorney, with yourself, to really figure out, what's the best way to navigate these waters. When one spouse owns a business in New York and they're getting divorced, what happens is we need to value that business. So presuming that it's what we call a marital asset, presuming that either the business was started during the course of the marriage or one spouse actively ran that business, the other spouse will have a claim not to the business itself, but to a portion of the value of that business. And to do that, it needs to be valued. And that's where we'll bring in the experts, where we'll bring in accountants that specialize in business valuations. There's a lot of discovery that's involved in that to make sure that we're getting all the information we need to accurately come up with a fair market value of that business. And then based on that value, based on what each spouse contributed to the business, to the marriage, we then determine what the non-titled spouse, the person who doesn't own the business, what their share should be of the value. Fortunately, it's rare that we have that a business will get shut down, because of course, if it's shut down, then there's no value, right? It's gone at that point. So most typically, businesses continue almost always post-divorce, and the way that we do that, the way that that's possible, is with a buyout. And so if somebody is owed money for their share of the business, the non-titled spouse, the person who's not running the business, they'll either get a lump sum if there's enough money, in the pot, if there's enough to be divided. They can get a lump sum at the time of the divorce. Other times we have to do a payout over time. So it may not be possible. Maybe it's a new business, a younger couple, their finances aren't great. And so there's not, the bulk of the marital estate is the value of that business. In a case like that, the business owner will have an obligation over a period of time to make payments to the non-business owner to buy out his or her share. When you're the business owner, you of course are concerned, where am I coming up with this money? And, sometimes, if you're fortunate, there's other assets. And so maybe, your spouse will get the house, or you'll get less out of the house. Maybe if you have investment accounts or retirement accounts, your spouse will, get a greater proportion of that to pay for their share of the value of your business. Sometimes those things don't exist. And when they don't exist, you'll have payments over time. Look, it's not going to be easy, but when the divorce is handled right, nobody wants you to lose that business. Your spouse, they may want you to lose the business emotionally, but financially they recognize they need that business to continue so that they can get the payments. And a judge, if your case is presented properly, should understand that if the financial burden on you is so great that you can't operate the business, that it doesn't make sense to go to work every day, well, that's not something that a judge should order. They should order payments that are relatively reasonable. It's going to hurt. Divorce hurts financially, but that will allow you to continue to operate that business, in a profitable manner, so that you can pay your spouse and you can still survive financially. So unfortunately, in many cases, there will be court involvement. If you can't work out a settlement on your own, if the parties, along with their lawyers, can't resolve things, cases do go to court. And there are times that, a percentage of those will require a judge to make the ultimate decision. The judge is going to decide on the value. They'll take expert testimony, but they're going to decide what the value of that business is. They're going to decide what the non-titled spouse, the person who doesn't own the business, what they're entitled to. And the judge will decide how those payments will be made, whether they're going to give it to the non-business owner in the form of a larger share of the remainder of the assets, or whether there's going to be a payout over time. We always tell our clients, if it were me, if it were my divorce, I would do everything I could to avoid going to court. And the reason for that, as an attorney, I became an attorney. I wanted to go to court. I wanted to try cases. I thought that was fun. I really enjoyed it. It's challenging. But I recognize that's not always in the client's best interest. Part of that, we have a lot of great judges where we practice. We have a great bench right now. But you never know. Judges come and go. Every year we have a little bit of turnover in the judges that are handling the matrimonial cases, or in most years we do. And we'll get new judges who may not be that experienced. And a judge only has so much time to learn about your situation, about the details of your situation. And so if you can, if it can be resolved, we're a big fan of resolving things. We're a big fan of settling when we can get a fair settlement for our clients. And fortunately, most of the time we can do that. If you or your spouse owns a business and you're now getting divorced, that's a complicated divorce. That's something that you want to hire an expert to do. It's something that in my firm we do all the time. We're really comfortable working in that field, in that area of matrimonial law, and we're here for you. Please, in those situations, call us, and if you're not calling us, make sure you're calling an expert.